bathtub drownings don't occur very often, and so they have to be looked at with a degree of suspicion. So this was a suspicious death.
I feel strongly that everybody came to the same conclusion that these two girls were evil.
Like, it's like I was choosing my life instead of her, because I also felt like I couldn't live like that anymore. So it's like I either kill her or myself. But then I thought, like, oh, I'm gonna kill her and myself.
While it's normal to hate your mother a little bit as a teenager, as most teenagers can't stand the rules their mothers tend to enforce, it's almost unheard of that teenagers would end their mother's life. The story of Anne Margaret Karubin and her two daughters, Caroline and Catherine, is a chilling reminder of how a relationship can go from appearing like the perfect relationship to planning out the perfect murder. These girls were so calculating and so meticulous in planning their mom's demise that the entire country of Canada was left shocked. Why did Caroline and Catherine choose to end their mother's life in this tragic way? And did they actually pay for their crimes? Let's find out in the story of the teens who murdered their mom by mixing drugs into her drink.
I realized after examining some of the intercepts that this was actually not a spur-of-the-moment homicide or murder, that this was planned and calculated, researched by both individuals.
On January 18th, 2003, at around 10:35 a.m., a young girl called 911. She sounded frantic and scared. She told them she and her sister had come back from dinner to discover that their mother had drowned and she was not breathing. When emergency services and members of law enforcement got to the scene, the woman, Anne Margaret Karubin, was gone. Because of how rare death by drowning was at that time, law enforcement were very suspicious. Immediately, forensics team took over and started photographing the scene.
Still didn't know exactly what we were dealing with. I did some photographs in other areas of the home, one which showed the living room, where everything was relatively neat and tidy.
There didn't appear to be any struggle, and everything appeared to be in its place.
So for things not to be completely knocked over within the bathroom wasn't a surprise. It was actually still relatively in order.
Except for one vodka bottle.
But there was a vodka bottle which was lying on its side on the coffee table.
While forensic was working on the scene, Anne Margaret's two daughters, 15-year-old Catherine and 16-year-old Caroline, who called 911, were questioned by detectives. They appeared to be very distraught, and they didn't say any more than they relayed to the dispatch on the phone. When the detectives couldn't get any more out of them, they were taken to a relative's house to spend the night. Their house had now become a probable crime scene.
During that brief interview or talking with the girls, they requested to go to the aunt's. She agreed that the girls could stay with her. It was close by, and it was easy to take them to a place of safety.
With the girls out of the way, the coroner got to work examining the body. At first, nothing stood out to the forensics team, but upon closer inspection, a few things seemed out of place.
We started to see things like we had two different glasses within the bathroom itself that had alcohol in it.
The temperature of the water also alarmed the forensics team. When people run baths, they tend to run warm baths, but in this case, the water was cold.
Within the tub itself, there was 6 inches of water depth within the tub. So with the body in there, it would have obviously displaced, but the water had cooled down to air temperature,
which made it a bit harder for the coroner to determine the time of death.
I would expect in a normal situation, if it had been a normal bath, that the water would have been warmer.
But the coroner hoped that he would have more information when he conducted the autopsy.
We were hoping that something would come out of the post-mortem examination that would lead us to conclude one way or the other.
But one thing was for certain. The way Anne Margaret passed away was very strange.
Drowning actually is still not that common. I've probably done perhaps maybe 25 drownings, and I've done maybe 6 or 7 that have occurred in a bathtub. From a forensic pathology point of view, any death in a bathtub is highly suspicious. It's unusual for people to die in a bathtub full of water.
Because of how rare it was and the few things that didn't add up, Anne Margaret's death was classified as a homicide.
Automatically, we treated this as a homicide right from the get-go. A homicide autopsy in this case, with a death in water, meant that we had to do some very specific things. In this case, we also took an extra sample of blood and took it up to our pathology lab and ran it for alcohol.
The first test the coroner ran was to determine Anne Margaret's alcohol level at the time of death. Her alcohol level was through the roof.
During the course of the autopsy, knew that this woman had a significantly elevated blood alcohol level in the range of 400 milligrams per 100 mLs. That is a potentially fatal level of alcohol. Somebody who's a chronic alcoholic might be very much different, but it's certainly a level under which somebody might pass out in a bathtub and accidentally drown.
The amount of alcohol found in her system was enough to have suppressed her body's natural instinct to fight for itself.
If you've taken enough alcohol and it depresses your central nervous system, it might suppress the cough response you have to get that water out of your lungs. And so that you can take the water in, the water just flows in a lot more easily.
While that provided a possible explanation for her drowning, something else wasn't adding up.
Often, in alcoholic people, we will see evidence of bruising from various falls. What's interesting in this case is that there are no old bruises on this woman's body.
It was strange that a woman who was described as an alcoholic by her daughters didn't have any scratches on her.
I would have expected in this case that if there's a long history of alcoholism, that we might have seen evidence of previous falls with some bruising. That was not evident in this case at all.
That puzzled the coroner, as he knew there was no explanation for why a woman who had been drunk multiple times, enough to earn the label of an alcoholic, would not have staggered and fallen a few times.
All the findings was we had this high level of alcohol in a relatively young woman who had signs of freshwater drowning, and no evidence of trauma.
But there was no evidence of foul play. Everything seemed to be in order, and most importantly, there were no suspects. There was no sign of forced entry in their home, and the girls had a solid alibi. They had been at a restaurant with friends. It was when they got home that they discovered their mom was in the state that she was in. Their friends willingly corroborated their story.
We didn't have any evidence that directly pointed to a homicide. You need absolute proof. And in terms of the autopsy, there wasn't any.
The coroner ruled the cause of death as accidental drowning, and the case was closed. The girls' aunt, their late mother's sister, became legal guardian. And to cap it all off, the sisters had inherited almost $200,000 in life insurance. It seemed like they had gotten away with murder. However, almost a year later, a shocking new twist develops in the story that leads the detectives to reopen the case.
This individual received some information from the older of the two sisters. He became aware of certain information and that the mother had actually been murdered or forcibly drowned in the bathtub of the residence.
While the sisters had been experts in not leaving any trails, the one thing they couldn't do was keep their mouths shut. After they believed that they got away with it, they bragged to several people about what they did. One of them, whom had known their mother and was a very close friend of the family, went to the authorities with what he knew.
He was providing us information that only the girls would be privy to, and that they had actually murdered their mother.
The officers decided to use him to get the sisters to confess.
He acted pretty much in a capacity as an agent for the police, and through some guidance with an agent handler, was able to meet with the girls and again engage both girls in conversation relating to the murder.
Not knowing that they were being recorded, the sisters did not hold back.
He went out to meet the older of the two sisters. He obtained a statement from her with respect to the murders.
What the detectives heard on the tapes was very disturbing and chilling.
And it was obvious from reviewing and transcribing that entire intercept that the older sister and possibly the younger sister were definitely involved in the murder of their mother. Initially, you don't want to believe that a 15 and 16-year-old would murder a parent, and especially their mother.
The girls had used their mother's weakness against her: alcohol and substances.
They were able to use the mother's weaknesses against her, which was the recent relationship breakup with her boyfriend. When this occurred, she would consume alcohol.
To To render her incapacitated, they used a mix of alcohol and pills, something the coroner missed the first time around.
We realized we should do a toxicology test looking specifically for codeine.
The detectives obtained a warrant for the release of the blood and urine sample taken from her during the initial autopsy. They found an unusual amount of pills in her system.
The mother had an abnormal amount of codeine in her system at the time of her death.
The case was now fully reopened, with detectives assigned to follow the sisters and obtain information. Because although they knew the how, they still needed to know the why.
Had officers assigned to find out what schools they went to and any other background information we could dig up on them.
The detectives wanted to make the arrest as quietly as possible, so they would not spook any possible accomplices the sisters might have had.
Because the younger generation of people are in communication with one another more readily through cell phones, through Blackberries, internet.
On January 21st, at around 7 a.m., the sisters were arrested.
They were obviously separated. We did not want them talking or influencing each other during that process.
The detectives also executed a search warrant on their property to find any information they might have missed the first time around.
I had approximately 50 to 55 officers that were out involved in the execution of the search warrant at the residence, searching the residence. And I had identified approximately 45 other individuals that I needed interviewed within a very short period of time. Anybody I thought could provide us information on the girls or the murder of the mother.
After they brought the girls to the station and started questioning them, they discovered information that chilled them to their bones. They started questioning the girls, starting with the older sister. She initially denied having anything to do with her mother's murder, but after hours of questioning, she cracked and confessed it all. Bizarrely enough, after she was done confessing, she laid down on the floor of the interrogation room and went to sleep.
That's not uncommon. I've been involved in several arrests where individuals have an adrenaline dump or some type of change physically, that once they have been arrested, they, for some reason, fall asleep.
The detectives moved on to the younger sister, but she was not going to be easy to crack. She continued to insist that she knew nothing about her mother's murder. She pretty much stuck to her previous account of what happened, but she did have one request.
The two girls wanted to speak with one another. I made the decision to allow that to happen, and they did speak to one another about the murder.
What followed was rather bizarre.
And they come up with this scheme about how they were going to pretend it was all a big joke they were putting on their friend, and that's the story they're going to tell the police.
Once they got their stories straight, the older sister went back to the interrogation room and took everything back.
So they come back into the rooms again, and she says, well, can you be in trouble for lying to police? And the officer says, well, what do you mean lying? He says, well, I didn't kill my mother, I was just lying to you.
With the older sister retracting her confession, the detectives were in a bind. They decided to find other means of nailing the sisters. They went to their home and took their computers. The aim was to find any sort of communication between the sisters that could help nail them.
And we forensically image the hard drive. Basically, we copy the drive from start to finish. Every bit is copied. We do it in such a way that we can prove that the image that we've taken is identical to the original computer.
And they found a lot more than they hoped for.
Delete something from your computer, that file pretty much in its entirety is still resident on that computer.
They found several chats between the sisters, planning how to unalive their mother.
You can physically go in and delete that chat, but again, with the software programs that we use, sometimes we can recover that.
With their chats, the detectives were able to piece together the sisters' evil plans, and it was beyond shocking.
One of their guidance counselors said that they were the most intelligent kids that he'd ever seen in 30 years of teaching. But he said their best quality was their ability to manipulate people.
The girls, though they appeared innocent, were actually very intelligent, and they had planned everything out carefully, leaving no stone unturned. It also appeared that they had been planning everything for months.
I realized after examining some of the intercepts that this was actually not a spur-of-the-moment homicide or murder, that this was planned and calculated, researched by both individuals.
They also realized that the girls did not come up with the plan for the perfect murder all on their own.
Once the girls sat down and came up with the idea of killing their mother for insurance monies, I believe they hatched the plan through research and talking with some friends.
On those computers, detectives found several pieces of evidence that showed how the sisters put their evil plans into motion.
They actually did research into the amount of alcohol, the amount of Tylenol or codeine and its effects mixed with alcohol, and the amount of time necessary to drown a person or hold them underwater.
They also discovered that the sisters had not worked alone. They identified one boy the girls were in constant communication with. He turned out to be the older sister's boyfriend.
We were able to show that the girls were actually chatting with this particular individual, and that he was willing to be an alibi for the two girls. He actually did show up the night of the murder.
Not only was he willing to provide them with an alibi, he also provided them with the pills.
He provided the one sister with Tylenol pills, sufficient enough to incapacitate the mother along with the alcohol.
Once the detectives had pieced together the evidence, the sisters were taken to court. All their immediate family and circle of friends believed the police had made a terrible mistake.
In fact, during the bail hearing, there was laughter throughout the whole courtroom. The father didn't believe it, the aunt certainly didn't believe it, their cousins thought it was a big joke.
Using their powers of manipulation, they were able to sway the public opinion to their favor, leading many locals to believe that they must have unalived their mother because she had hurt them. As they were released on bail with constricting conditions, the sisters continued to deceive their own families.
And they spend that entire year living at the aunt's house. And this is the aunt whose sister they have killed. And everybody supports them. They think the police have made a terrible mistake.
While everyone pitied them, however, the sisters used the same computers they used to plot their evil plans, to brag about how they've managed to fool everyone. Although they thought that they got away with the perfect murder, the evidence showed a carefully calculated plan to take their mother's life because they hated her.
The girls poured drinks for the mother, provided her pills, which was not abnormal for them to do that.
The pills, plus the high levels of alcohol, induced an almost unconscious state. When they had their mother exactly where they wanted her, they then went and filled the tub and prepared the scene of their crime. They carefully laid their mother in the tub, ensuring that she didn't fall or have any bruising that could be traced back to them. One of the sisters then put on gloves to mask their prints and hold their mother underwater until there was no breath left in her. The entire time they put their chilling plan into motion, records show that they were communicating back and forth with their friends. They then got dressed very quickly and headed out to a local bar where they had arranged to meet their accomplice and another friend to establish their alibi. After their dinner was over, they went back home and called the authorities, pretending they had come home to meet their mom like that.
The older sister makes the call, the younger sister's in the background. The older sister sounds like she is upset, but when you review that with other evidence in the case, you realize that she was play acting.
During the trial, the sisters' motives were revealed. It turned out that they took their mother's life because they desperately wanted her out of their lives, but that wasn't all. It was also revealed that they had been eyeing their mother's life insurance of almost $200,000 and the life it would afford them to have. But what's the most chilling was the discovery that 3 people knew what the sisters were going to do before they did it, and yet none of them ever turned them in. Even after they committed the evil act, they bragged about it to tons of kids their age, but again, none of them thought to say anything to their parents or the authorities, which allowed the sisters to get away with it for almost a year. The other accomplice, the older sister's boyfriend, who supplied them with the tools, was also convicted of conspiracy to commit murder.
Evidence in this particular case really became the crux of the case. To my knowledge, this is probably one of the foremost technical investigations that took place in this country.
After several weeks of trial, both sisters were convicted of first-degree murder. But because they were 18 years old at the time of the crime, according to Canadian law, the most they could serve was 10 years.
Convicted as youth under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, it meant that all they could serve was a maximum of 10 years. First-degree murder, that's the most you can serve.
And out of those 10 years, the maximum they could actually spend in prison was 6 years.
Only serve a maximum of 6 years in custody. The rest can be served in a halfway house, even in their own house under house arrest eventually.
And because they were convicted as youths, their names and their mothers' names were also protected by the law, which meant that once they were done serving their mandatory 6 years, they could go anywhere they wanted. Because although people knew of the crime, nobody knew their names. The only ones who knew they were the Bathtub sisters were their immediate family members and the friends they bragged to.
I feel strongly that everybody came to the same conclusion that these two girls were evil.
The horrific thing about this is that these were 15 and 16-year-old kids, and they almost got away with the perfect crime.
Hey, thanks for watching. What do you think about the sisters who planned the perfect murder? Do you know other cases like that? Let me know in a comment, and before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button.